Welcome back. Joining me now is Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Senator Booker, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you for having me again.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Let's dive right in. Let's start with the tariffs. You have actually long emphasized the need for fair trade deals to protect American workers, to prevent jobs from going overseas. If President Trump's tariffs do in fact lead to better trade deals in the long run, even if there is some short-term economic pain, would that justify President Trump's tariffs?
We're not seeing any likelihood of that. I mean, right away off the bat, we're seeing him break his promise. He said on day one he would lower prices. This is going to increase the average family in America's prices from $4,000 to $5,000 of more expenses to the American family. We're seeing real decisions being made, from Stellantis to Cleveland Cliffs, a steel manufacturer, laying off thousands of people. And in addition to that, President Trump now has a crisis in credibility. We're hearing from around the world, people just don't know if they can trust him. His sense of honor and decency actually has real consequences globally, and is forcing countries who've made deals with him in the past, like Canada and Mexico, which then he upends, really forcing countries to think about other options. And it is a real national security issue when you see Japan and South Korea, two key allies, meeting with China to talk to them about how to deal with what they perceive as a threat of a chaotic and unpredictable president to the world and global economy.
Well, let me talk about how some of your Democratic colleagues are responding to this moment. A few have actually stopped short of condemning President Trump's tariffs outright, really trying to walk a fine line. Take a look.
Tariffs are a powerful tool. They can be used strategically or they can be misused.
Tariffs are a very important part, a tool in our economic toolbox, but they have to be used in a way that is targeted.
I understand the motivation behind the tariffs. And I can tell you, here's where President Trump and I do agree. We do need to make more stuff in America.
Now, as you know, even former President Biden kept some of President Trump's tariffs in place from the first term. Are those Democrats taking the right approach, Senator?
Listen, I just want to, for myself, tell you a full-throated, unequivocal condemnation of the Trump tariffs. There's no wisdom in this, the chaotic way he's doing it, the challenges he's putting on American families in terms of costs, rising costs and jobs. This has no strategy. It has no sense. He's being attacked by people on the left and the right, and from the markets, devastating people's retirement security, to the global chaos right now and unpredictability. There's no equivocation here. His tariff strategy is wrong. The way he's putting it out there, no thoughtfulness, no slow increase of tariffs, it is all just wrong. It should be condemned. And it should be stopped the way it's happening right now, because it's hurting American people.
You know, some of your Democratic colleagues are actually calling for an investigation into whether or not there was insider trading. The president saying it's a good time to buy, and then, of course, hitting the pause button on some of those tariffs. Do you believe that Democrats have any real evidence that anyone in the administration profited off of the president's policies and announcements, or is this just a fishing expedition?
You know, here's the problem with Donald Trump and congressional Republicans, is our whole system was designed to have checks and balances. Now, Trump has designed an administration like none we've ever seen before. He is attacking the very agencies that are supposed to have independent oversight of these kind of actions. So we see him hiring people based upon their loyalty, not based upon their expertise. The real group that should be holding investigations and accountability and even just oversight is Congress.
But is there any evidence, Senator? Do you think there's any evidence that anyone profited off of these tariffs?
There is enough of an offense here. There's enough smoke here that should demand congressional hearings. We are a separate and equal branch of government. The Constitution lays out very clearly that Congress is not supposed to be spineless and submissive. It is supposed to hold up oversight over the president. These are real, legitimate, justifiable questions, and not to have hearings, not to do any kind of oversight undermines the faith we have in our government, undermines the trust we need in our nation right now.
Yeah.
And so from the signal gate all the way to this kind of symbols or signs of corruption, Congress should be doing its job.
Senator, a couple more to get to here, and we're almost out of time. The Supreme Court, as you know, ordered the Trump administration to, quote, facilitate and effectuate the return of a Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador. There's been a big back and forth between the administration and the courts over this. Overnight, President Trump putting out a post saying that ultimately this is the decision of the El Salvadoran president who's going to be visiting the White House on Monday. Do you think the Trump administration is defying a court order?
It certainly appears that they are, and they're trying to play too cute with parsing words. The court has ordered the return of this person and that the Trump administration should do it. They're paying an authoritarian leader in El Salvador to hold people in the worst imaginable types of prisons that he is sent there without any due process. And this isn't just about Mr. Garcia. This is about every American understanding that this president is making an assault on the due process rights that are afforded to people in our country. Everybody from Anton Scalia to other conservative think tanks have said very clearly, you cannot disappear people off American streets. We are a nation of rules, and due process is clearly one of them. And to erode the due process rights of anyone is a threat to the due process rights of everyone. This is a democratic slippage, and we all should be speaking out against it.
Senator, let's talk about the future of the party. Apparently, Vice President Harris is still weighing a presidential run in 2028. Do you think Vice President Harris should run again?
You know, I know Vice President Harris. I don't think she's concerning herself with 2028. I think she's concerning herself, like most Americans right now, is why do I have a president that's attacking due process?
But do you think she should run again? Do you want to see her run again, Senator? You supported her. Do you want to see her run again?
I am literally getting thousands and thousands of phone calls, people stopping me on the streets in crisis right now. They're losing jobs. They're seeing their costs go up. They're worried about their housing. Honestly, I don't care about 2028. I care about stopping the hurting of American people right now. And if Democrats in general, we should not be concerned about the party's future. We should be concerned about people's present, and that's where I'm focused.
30 seconds left. Very quickly, what should the message from Democrats be right now, Senator?
We should be focusing on the American people. This is not about party. It's not about left or right. It's about right or wrong. We are in a moral moment right now in our country with a tax on Medicaid in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest in our country. This is not who we are. We need to fight to defend American jobs, American costs and economic security, American health care. We are in a real crisis with the bill that the Republicans are pushing and the assaults on the integrity of this country and the constitutional principles. It's time to stand up and fight back against what's happening. And this is not just for Democrats. It's for Republicans in Congress that whisper to me privately their concerns about what the president's doing. This is a moral moment. It's time for more and more people to stand up.
Senator, yes or no? Are you considering a run in 2028?
I'm focused on today and my reelection in 26. I've already announced to the people of New Jersey, I'm hoping they'll allow me to be their senator for another 6 years. And let's be clear, I'm proud of the work that we've done over the last 6 years. There's been no senator that has had a better record of bringing resources back to the state of New Jersey. So I'm focused on the now, working to defend folks and, God willing, being reelected in 2026.
All right. I don't hear you ruling it out. Senator Booker, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you'll come back soon with that answer.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.